And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show. I'm LA Batchelor with thank you. It's joining us as always. Could have been doing anything else, but you decided to be a part of this broadcast. We certainly appreciate you. Uh, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page, uh, LA Batchelor at YouTube. LA Batchelor, Batchelor with a T at YouTube. Check us out. We definitely would appreciate you. Want to bring in my guest. Always good to have him on. He is a sports talk show host. He's a reporter covering the Bills, the NFL, and just about everybody else, and does a great job. Been a minute to have him on. He is Pat Freeman. And Pat, always a pleasure, my friend, to get you on, bro.
Oh, thanks for having me on the award-winning Bachelor Pad. It's always a pleasure, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Listen, we talked last year about some of the deficiencies that the Bills had, and Josh Allen having to step up and be better than he's been before, and certainly they're off to a great start. What's been the difference with this team? It's only 2 games, but certainly they've looked offensively lights out. But what's been the difference? I told my son I think Von Miller gives him such identity on defense, and he really brings so much to the table to allow others to fly free, especially the back end on the defense, which helps the offense at the same time. So, what's been the difference so far this year?
They have been the total package, brother. Every game, it just seems that this team is ready to play so far. And to me, they have the best roster in football, top to bottom, this year. And if they can stay healthy, they've got a lot of injuries right now. None of them are season ending, but some of them are going to keep some guys out this week. This team can go a long, long way. I think the biggest difference defensively, as you said, is Von Miller. Von Miller, you have to account for Von Miller on each and every play. And by that happening, it frees up Greg Russo, who's off to a great start, his second year. He is playing very well, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact of Von Miller being on this team, and you have to account for him each and every play. Another person that they brought back who fits into the system perfectly is Jordan Phillips. He didn't do well out in Arizona because he's a big guy, but with this team under Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, they rotate their linemen and it keeps these guys fresh. So Jordan doesn't have to play as many snaps as he did in Arizona, and he ended up being injured for the couple of years he was gone. So him coming back, Ed Oliver playing at a pretty very high level, but he didn't play this week. He has a ankle sprain, and hopefully he'll be back this week. They just have a very good roster, LA. This is a very, very seasoned roster at this point. 5 years in to Sean McDermott. This is his 6th year, but this roster is about 5 years in. I counted since Josh Allen came in. And the biggest difference in him, Josh, as you know, had a very poor completion rating when he first started in the league. But this guy put the work in. I mean, he's really worked on it, and they also surrounded him with some great talent, and that is a recipe for success. Running game hasn't really showed itself yet, but I have a lot of confidence in Devin Singletary, and you also got a new offensive coordinator who I think is doing a pretty good job so far in Ken Dorsey. Ken Dorsey was on that University of Miami team that for 3 years was just dominant under Butch Davis. So Ken Dorsey, he worked with Cam Newton. He's worked with Josh Allen as a quarterback coach. I think those are your biggest differences so far. And it's going to be very difficult to beat this team. What will beat this team is health and themselves. but they're as good as any roster in football right now. And the only thing I think that could beat them, like I said, is health. And, health is a major factor in the NFL and themselves not coming into a game ready to play. And, that can happen any Sunday in the NFL, any Sunday.
The thing is, too, we're talking with Pat Freeman. Um, the first two games were not cakewalks against teams, and I mean they beat the defending champions. Defensively, just I think anyway, it's the NFL. Uh, Teams are going to figure out Cooper Cup and the Rams, and you saw that in week one. Week two, defensively, they got after it again with Henry, and they're just physical. They got a nasty swag to them now. They just know that they're good. Everybody talks about the Chiefs, and deservedly so. They won their first two. They look,
Absolutely.
but they're impressive. But what about the swag with this team and the fact, Pat, that they're not, these weren't two cakewalk games, and then they got to go to Miami, which put up some points too. So, what about this team and their attitude and their tenacity that they have now?
You're absolutely right. LA, their first six games are against quality opponents. Last week, you beat the defending Super Bowl champion. This week, you blew out the defending Super Bowl champion too, eventually 31-10. You blew out the Tennessee Titans. At one point, that game was 7-7. And then you blew them out physical them to the max. Game was over after the third quarter. You beat them 41-7. And now you got to go to an undefeated Miami team that came back on a pretty good Ravens team, who you face the week after, right? So the Bills, if you look at their first six games, it's going to tell you who this team is. If they go 6-0, man, I don't know what to tell you, because you're going up against the defending Super Bowl champion. You beat them. You beat the defending number one seed in the AFC last year. You beat them. You're going up against a much improved, undefeated Miami team this week. The week after, you take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are always a competitive team. Whether they're rebuilding, whatever you want to call it, they're always a competitive team. And then you go to you go to Baltimore after that. No, you go to Baltimore after Miami. I'm sorry, and then you play Pittsburgh after Baltimore, and then you play Kansas City. So your first six games are going to tell you exactly who this team is. But remember, one of the greatest lessons Wade Phillips taught me, and he said the first 5 games of the year, coaches really don't have enough book on what other teams are doing. You don't know what you're made of as a coach until towards the end of the year, when they have enough information on you, they have a lot of your tendencies, and that's where you really find out where a team is going. So this first part of the year, yes, it's defining, because the first 6 games against all potential playoff opponents. So it's going to tell a lot. But for me, I need to see how you're playing towards the end of the year. But these first 6 games are definitely a test for this team. As you know, in the NFL, you only got 17 games. Every game is a test. So this team, as you said, has a great swagger. They've been a top 5 defense for years, and especially under Leslie Frazier. This man should be a head coach somewhere. Should have gotten his second opportunity. But under him, he is a great defensive mind. Defensively, the team has improved. They brought in some big guys. Daquan Jones, they picked him up from Tennessee. They brought in Tim Settles from the Washington Commanders, and they brought back Jordan Phillips. And I think those are key components in shutting down Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had 12 carries for 25 yards, but he got half of those yards on 1 carry. So other than that, he was getting hit in the backfield. And Tremaine Edmonds is playing like he's playing for a new contract, which he is. So He's definitely playing, auditioning for maybe other teams and maybe forcing the Bills' hand on giving him an extension.
Yeah, and those Edmonds boys. His brother in Pittsburgh has been playing pretty well the first couple of weeks too. Talking with Pat Freeman here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Pat, let's look at the AFC East as a whole. You mentioned the Dolphins with their comeback against the Ravens. Jets get a big win on the road at Cleveland, and when you look at New England winning at Pittsburgh, all of a sudden this division looks formidable. But it's still Buffalo's to lose. But assess the rest of the division in terms of where they are and their abilities and a chance to make the playoffs.
Well, I think the weakest team of the ones you mentioned is still the Jets. I think as long as Belichick is in New England, they're going to be competitive. But they don't have the roster that I think compares to Miami or Buffalo. I think Buffalo and Miami right now are the top two teams because of talent. And Miami has one asset that you can't teach, and that's speed. They are a fast team with Waddle and Tariq Hill. That is a problem for anybody. And they have a very good tight end. And Tua has got to show and prove that last week was not a fluke. I mean, he's had some pretty bad games, but last week he showed what we've seen and hoped for all along out of him coming out of University of Alabama. But he goes up against a very, very tough team. But remember now, the Bills, Dane Jackson had a pretty serious looking neck injury. I don't think he's going to play this week. He did walk out of the hospital. He is recovering, but he's got to go through some more tests to make sure that there was not any permanent damage. But that was a pretty ugly injury he suffered on Monday night, and I don't believe he's going to play. So you're looking at two rookie corners and Teron Johnson basically being your nickelback. And that could be where I'm going at. If I'm Miami, I'm going to test those rookie corners, even though they've been playing very well. Kyer Elam out of University of Florida and Christian Benford out of Villanova. They've played very, very well so far, but you have not faced the speed of a Tariq Hill or Waddle. So this is definitely going to be a test for them. And the best thing for the Bills to do is to keep Tua under pressure. If you get him under pressure, you can nullify what those other guys are doing and to get him off the block. And I think that's their biggest test coming up. But the division as a whole, as you said, I still believe it's Buffalo's to lose. Buffalo, to me, this is a veteran roster, veteran coaching staff. These guys have been playing together a long time. You've got Josh Allen has become a formidable quarterback in this league. And I think he has probably one of the hardest working wide receivers. A lot of people don't believe that, but he is. This guy puts the work in, and we're talking about Stephon Diggs. He's in incredible physical condition. He is a tremendous player, and he puts the work in each and every week. Now, Gabe Davis has a little bit of an ankle injury. I don't know if he's going to be available this week. He's listed as limited on the injury report, but that injury report is pretty full. But I think a lot of those guys will be able to play by Sunday. But it's going to be interesting. I have it Buffalo, Miami, New England, and I think the Jets will take the doormat again. They're just not ready for prime time. They've got some good young players, though. They had a very good draft, and I think there are good things coming to the Jets in the future.
Yeah, I mean, as we look at the league overall, the two New York teams, well, city teams, if you will, playing in Jersey, are 3-1, and I don't know if anybody's seen that coming. It's a long time. This is a long season, but the Giants being 2-0, Just being 1-1, that's pretty impressive. When you look around the league, and I agree with you with um, the Patriots being the second best team there. Um, Talk about the rest of the AFC. We saw um, the Ravens blow a lead. So the AFC North right now, it seems, could be up for grabs. Still the Ravens, I think, to win. And then when you look out west, oh, by the way, Kansas City still Kansas City. They found a way to win in the second game. They blew out team in the first game. So assess the rest of the AFC.
Well, I agree with you. The AFC North is going to be up for grabs. I think a lot of those teams have come a little slow out of the gate. Pittsburgh will always be competitive. My question mark on Pittsburgh this year, I am a big time Mike Tomlin fan. My question mark is Mitch Trubisky. How long do you keep him in? I mean, you know what you got with him. 14, 17 points a game. He's not a big time NFL quarterback. And that's what he did with the Bears. And he's not going to do any better with Pittsburgh. I think they need to start thinking about going to the guy they drafted. But Pittsburgh in that division will always be competitive. Cincinnati's a little slow out the gate, but I think they'll be okay. They need to shore up their offensive line blocking. I think those guys are going to have to protect Joe Burrow a little bit better than what they've been doing. The Baltimore Ravens, they had some problems in their defensive backfield as far as injuries during the course of that game, but there's still no excuse. You took the pedal off the metal and you just let Miami get back in a game that you should have won easily without that type of letdown. And one of the other things in that division, too, is that Cleveland, I think they're going to be competitive, but I still think that division is going to come down to how well Cincinnati and Baltimore go at each other. Now, in the AFC West, they were trying to say that all teams are competitive out there, but San Diego, the Raiders, they should be competitive. But the class of that division is still the Kansas City Chiefs. And Denver will be the first franchise to fire their coach. Nathaniel Hackett should have never been given a head coaching job. He has done nothing in the NFL that makes him deserving of being an NFL head coach. He has lived off of his father's relationships his entire NFL career. He was the offensive coordinator up here, if you remember, for a couple of years under Doug Marrone. He was awful. And he went to Green Bay, and he was the offensive coordinator under a head coach that runs the offense, and you got Aaron Rodgers. So that means you should have gotten a head coaching job over Eric Bieniemy or Leslie Frazier. Are you kidding me? That's that old boy network once again working itself with John Elway, who has a relationship with Nathaniel Hackett's father, Paul Hackett. That's all that is. That's that Stanford connection. But there's no way in the world that Nathaniel Hackett should be a head coach in the National Football League. And one other thing about the Denver Broncos that a lot of people are whispering about is how heavy Russell Wilson has come into camp. And Russell Wilson has never been that heavy. I don't know if it's the married life or what, but he's a little bit heavier than I think you would like to see Russell Wilson at quarterback. And I think that's going to take away a lot of his mobility this year with the Denver Broncos. But I am not a Nathaniel Hackett fan. I don't think he has any business being named head coach over an Eric Bieniemy or a Leslie Frazier.
Well, you not only and folks that are listening don't know who Nathaniel Hackett is and his father Paul Hackett, coached in the NFL. They're white coaches, and we've seen black coaches get stepped on and stepped upon. You mentioned Leslie Frazier in Buffalo, Eric Bieniemy, still with Kansas City, still waiting for that first job already proven themselves. They're not like Pat, special teams coaches or some, you know, assistant coach or whatever. They are top coordinators, defensive and offensive coordinaters, yet they don't get it. And then you look at, I'm living, of course, in North Carolina, Pat. You look at Baker Mayfield, who was, I'm going to be nice and say average at best with Cleveland. They make a big deal out of how he got them to the playoffs and beat the Steelers, whatever, but he had a great team. Um, that he gets a second chance. You know, he was straight struggling. I don't care if it's injuries or not. If you're injured, you shouldn't play any in the first place anyway. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but he gets a job, and then they make fun of a Jacoby Brissett or somebody else or guys who are not playing black quarterbacks. They still continue to look at them as they either it's a catch 22. You either got to scramble, which they hate, stay in the pocket. And then when you stay in the pocket and you get hurt, then that's a problem too. There's a no-win situation with the black quarterback, and there's a no-win situation with the black coach.
Right, right. It's still continuing, and no matter, Brian Flores, you see, they're not even talking about his lawsuit anymore.
Right,
And one of the teams he mentioned was the Denver Broncos. And they hire this guy Nathaniel Hackett, who's done nothing. I mean, he's gotten jobs based on nepotism, and he's not worthy. He's going to be. I predict he'll be the first head coach out of this last class fired. They're going to force because Denver's got a lot more talent than what we're seeing these first couple of weeks.
right.
And that's because Nathaniel Hackett is not prepared for prime time. He's not head coach material. And the only reason he's a head coach is because of the relationships with his father and John Elway. I mean, that's the only reason. I mean, you can't tell me his resume is better than Eric Bieniemy or Leslie Frazier. Eric's got a Super Bowl ring. I mean, what else has he got to do? Leslie Frazier's had a top 5 defense for 5 straight years.
Yeah.
It's incredible the decisions of some of these owners when it comes to the hiring of head coaches, and they always seem to ignore the resumes of qualified black head coaches. There's about 85 qualified black assistants in this league that are not being even interviewed for some of these opportunities.
Pat, you mentioned Russell Wilson with the Broncos. Of course, he spent his entire career up until now in Seattle. Were you surprised that the fans booed him? This is a black man, again, sort of like a LeBron. No scandals.
Nothing.
He got married, didn't have sex until he got married, right?
Right.
Doing
Just a
that the
good
right
guy.
way. Yeah, good guy. And he goes back. He gets them the 2 Super Bowls. He wins one. It should have been 2 if he didn't have a moron of a coach who blew that game. He would have had 2 Super Bowls, and they boo him. They
Right.
boo him. I was very surprised. Were you shocked that they booed this young black man and all that he meant for that franchise?
Surprised, no, but totally disagreed with it. Uh, that man gave you his heart and soul, got you to 2 Super Bowls, should have won 2 Super Bowls. He's a class act, never mistreated anybody. But as you know, Seattle, their biggest problem started when they paid Russell. And once they paid Russell, it was the end of being able to pay those other guys, the Russell Okuns and the rest of them. They started basically dismantling the franchise. And I don't blame him for that. That's not his fault. He's supposed to get paid the highest amount that he can, especially in a sport this brutal. But you would not see that with other quarterbacks. You're not going to see that happen with other quarterbacks like Tom Brady. I don't think he was booed. But for them to boo Russell Wilson, I thought was a classless act and shows the hot, cold nature of NFL fans. And that's why I really try to distance myself from that reality. I mean, there's a reality where we are, and there's a reality where they are. And we cover these teams, and I try to kind of stay in the middle. When I first started, I might have said, hey, I'm a Bills fan, but I'm not really a fan anymore because it requires us, as you know, we got to ask some hard questions sometimes.
Right.
And you can't be a fan. You got to ask the questions that need to be asked at that time to be an effective journalist. So, you get to the point, I know I respect Mike Tomlin a lot, but I'm not a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers anymore. But I am a fan of Mike Tomlin. I just think he's, for the way he's been treated, and that's another example. If you read the papers every year since he's been there, they've talked about replacing Mike Tomlin. Hasn't had a losing season in 13 years.
Right.
He's the second longest tenured coach, I believe, at this point, behind Belichick.
Belichick, right.
And every year, even with a winning record, I think this could be it for him. Really? Come on.
Yeah. And, I think you're right. You can, root for a player or a coach and not root for the team. Like I said, I'm rooting for Jacoby Brissett in Cleveland, but I'm not going to root for the Browns. It'd be nice if he does well and they lose. You kind of pick and choose your thing. And you're right, as a Steeler fan, and you've been to far more Super Bowls than I did, but the last one I went to was when they beat the Cardinals. So, it was hard to hold it in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But we did, and we got it done. Last question for you, Pat, and we'll get to your show. What are the keys for Buffalo going on the road and getting a dub, and going 3-0? Again, Miami, man, that Miami Ravens game was nothing but speed. And everybody's flying. Waddle, all these guys are flying. Lamar, everybody, Jonave, all these guys flying all over the place. So what are the keys for Buffalo to stay undefeated and get a road win?
Well, I think our offense comes in pretty, they have a couple of bruises, but for the most part, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox is on the injury report, and Gabe Davis is on the injury report. Those are somewhat concerning. But I like what Ken Dorsey has been doing. He even ran a screen pass, something Brian Dable rarely did. And he's been spreading the ball around. Offensively, I think the Bills will do just fine. I think Miami's going to have a tough time defending this offense and Josh Allen. But defensively, the Bills, I think, are going to have – they're only averaging 66 yards a game so far for rushing. Mm-hmm. So running the ball is going to be a problem for Miami. Where the Bills are going to have their struggles is dealing with that speed. And they're going to have to get an effective pass rush on Tua like they did last year. They came out of the gate pressuring Tua, knocked him out of the game in Miami. But you're going to have to put enough pressure on Tua to take him off the block that he can't get the ball to that speed. So that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, coming into this game. And the fact of the matter is that Tre'Davious White is not playing yet. And now it looks like Dane Jackson, your other starting corner, is going to be out. So you got two rookies starting that corner. And that's a recipe for I'm going to test you for a coach. You know what I'm saying? I got two rookies, and I got Tyreek Hill and Waddle. We got to see what you made of from the beginning of the game. So
yeah,
obviously that's coming.
Yeah, and Tua, they talk about in terms of him throwing the ball, his accuracy in the short range game is there. So, and especially if a Bill's pressure is going to come, he's going to 1-2 throw, get
Right.
that ball out. That's at least probably their plan anyway. All right, Mighty Oba, talk about your show and talk about your book. I know you got a book out. We need to push that, and when you come on again, we'll definitely push it some more.
Oh, by the way, your book came back today, buddy.
Oh, good. At least it
Yeah.
came back. At least it
Yeah,
came.
I'm headed to Miami. There's the package, so I'll send it back out. I get back on Monday, but I'm headed to Miami early in the morning, so I'll send that back out to you probably Monday or Tuesday. It only came back because I didn't have the apartment number. So now that I have the apartment number, we'll make sure we get that back out to you. But the name of the book is The Art of the Interview, Book One. It's a collection of some of my favorite interviews. Has absolutely nothing to do with sports. Nothing. None of my interviews in this book are
Well, you
sports
just
related.
even your last show you sent to me didn't have anything to do with sports. So you
Right, right.
collected,
I'm going back and forth. I
right,
figured this is my last go round. I've been doing this 28 years, and I figured I would go back and forth. Um, the last show I think I sent you was Daryl Orlando Ledbetter out of Atlanta.
right.
I think I just sent you that one. But this week I have Dr. Holly Quixie on, and she's an expert at matriculation at the college level. She helps. She was brought in specifically at Buffalo State College to help people of color matriculate at the college level. We have
Mm,
a lot of our young kids that are starting college but aren't finishing college. So her concentration is to engage the parents so that they can assist these young people in finishing what they're starting. So this is a good show for parents that have young people approaching the college level or have young people in college that are having some of the struggles that a lot of us had when we started our higher education careers. But her specialty is engaging the parents and helping young people matriculate at the college level. So I'm looking forward to having her on this week. And on the new show, the name of it is Night Talk with the Mighty Oba, but it's more available on demand. It's on Spectrum Digital Cable out of Western New York, but it's available to the entire country on demand. I've got some great interviews coming up with some former NFL players, a couple of current NFL players, but I interview people of different fields to talk about economics in our community. So it's not totally devoted to sports, and I go back and forth with issues. I also have one coming out with Dr. Olafari Hutchinson talking about the midterm elections. He's got a new book coming out specifically looking at the importance of the midterm elections. So we're doing a lot more than just sports as I wind down this career. I know I still look like I'm 25 with this gray beard, but
mm.
I've been doing this a long time, and I think this is my last 3 or 4 years, and then I'm going to call it a career.
Where can they get the book though?
Amazon. You can order it on Amazon. It's available. I think it's on sale now for $12. So it's a great book. It's 236 pages. I poured my heart into it. It's 8 of my favorite interviews. It includes an interview with Stokely Carmichael,
Wow.
aka Kwame Ture, Dr. Jeremiah Wright. I interviewed him right after the controversy when President Obama was then Senator Obama, and he was a member of Dr. Jeremiah Wright's church. I talk about what happened in how I had to get that interview and what transpired. I have another interview, well, really a chapter of an interview with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, one of my favorite people. This lady dedicated her entire life fighting white supremacy and racism. She probably wrote the most foremost book the crest theory, looking at that specific subject. I interviewed Ilyasa Shabazz. She is the third daughter of El Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, and Dr. Betty Shabazz. That was one of my favorite interviews. Also, Professor James Smalls, who is a longtime professor at City College out of New York, and Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, one of the foremost economic minds that we have in our community, still teaching at Clark Atlanta and also touring around the country with his work. And the last person is now the exalted ancestor, Steve Coakley. I interviewed him about the assassination of Martin Luther King and his research with that very controversial topic, which still, to me, has not been fully resolved in the public. But he brings out some very key information in that interview with him, and he's since gone on to the ancestry. So I really appreciate putting that chapter in the book also.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, wow. Stokely Carmichael and others that standing out. That's pretty impressive. And you can get the book, folks, on Amazon.com. Amazon.com. You can check out the book, and you know, Pat's a character, so I'm sure when you read it, I'm sure when I get to see it, it's going to be pretty impressive. Pat, listen, man, I appreciate you, man. You be careful going to South Beach,
Yes,
and
sir.
we will talk with you next week, hopefully, and hopefully I'll get the book. We can get you on and talk about it as well.
All right, appreciate you. I'll put that in the mail probably on Tuesday as soon as I get back.
All right. Thanks, Pat. Appreciate you,
All
man.
right, take
All
care
right.
now.
All right now. Pat Freeman, always good to have him on. Mighty Oba. And of course, he does a show as well on the air. So make sure you check him out. And the book is on Amazon.com. Amazon.com. Do check it out. Want to bring in my guest, of course, always good to have him on from the Black College Sports Network and the HBCU Pro Sports Media Association. Good friend, doing his thing for HBCUs and his insight, man. I don't know too many people that don't know how good he is in terms of covering the HBCU. He is AD Drew, and AD, I appreciate you, brother, with your colorful background there.
Hey, you forgot D2football.com
Oh,
also
my,
as one of our things. So I've had to narrow my focus just a little bit since I have to focus on the SIAC for D2football.com. But I still follow all of them, but my number one focus this year is the SIAC.
absolutely. Uh, Man, what do you say about Jackson State? We'll start there. I mean, say what you want about Grambling State and how good or bad they are, but Jackson State, as you reported on the website there, I mean, just dominating, just absolutely dominating, 66-24. What is it so special about this team? We know all the weapons they have on offense, but what is so special about this team that they look so dominating and they look like they're on a mission?
Defense. It's the defense. Offense is not going to click every time. Gonna be a step slow. You're gonna be a step off. Wind may affect you. Weather may affect you, but defense travels. Running game travels. This season, Jackson State has had both. They've had as good as everything has been for me to them. Their defense has been outstanding, and their running game has been outstanding.
Yeah, they have, and they just seem to be on a mission. You look at Central, who I thought 80 wasn't as good coming into this year and what they lost, but they had a nice, impressive road win over the University of New Hampshire. We always see HBCUs go to places like my hometown, University of New Haven, and Southern, and some of these other places, and struggle a little bit. In particular, the the D2 schools. But Central off to a nice start. Are you surprised about the start they got?
Did you see Central last year?
Yeah.
Okay, they were young last year. They were competitive and they were good. It starts off with quarterback play. When you have a quarterback play such as Davis Richard is for Central, you have a chance. You mix that in with a good wealth of talent on defense, a strong running game, and Central is going to be a team to beat. South Carolina State better look real close behind their back. You know how you run in a race and you see about the corner of your eye? Because Central's right there coming out the corner of your eye, and it would not surprise me if Central wins the MEAC. But I said this on our podcast Sunday, Brian and I on our podcast Sunday, BCSN Sports Wrap. JB Walker was one of our guests on there Sunday. I want you to take a look at Central's schedule. Look at Central's schedule this year. Let's assume they can't get over that Jackson State hurdle. I'm here to tell you, Central has a better resume to get them to the FCS playoffs than FAMU did last year if Central runs the table everywhere else and only loses to Jackson State. And Jackson State wins the MEAC.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's saying a lot because, a lot of people like myself made the argument for FAMU last year.
And it was a very good argument, but that same argument that you made for Florida A&M University, you should be making that and then some for Central State University because you got to think about it. FAMU pretty much had a SWAC schedule last year. The 1 point loss to Jackson State helped FAMU, and then they ran through the SWAC. But if Central gets there, they would have gotten there beating more teams outside of the MEAC than they beat in the MEAC, just based on default, because they play 6 games non-conference, 5 games conference. That's why I say Central gets to the playoffs. If they don't get bid to the Celebration Bowl, Central will have a better resume because they have beaten more non-conference opponents.
Talking with AD Drew, of course, on the Batchelor News radio show. You talk about Hampton in the article, and they're undefeated and looking good, winning of course, the battle of the real HU, if you will. Nice, impressive win against Norfolk State. And I don't know how good Norfolk State is, so I don't know.
Not too good this year. I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm not trying to take anything from Hampton, but Norfolk State lost a lot, and I don't know. Is that a quality win to you?
Hampton Pirates, folks, take these 3 wins that you had early, because you may not get another one when you get into that conference schedule. Just go put it to you like that. Hampton's schedule is a gauntlet after these first 3 games. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a quality win. It could be a quality win depending on where Norfolk comes out at the end. Let's think about it. Norfolk lost to App State, the same App State that beat Notre Dame. So what does that really say about that loss that Norfolk took against them? They lost to a team that beat a P5 team. So that victory over Norfolk is worth something, but the victory over Howard hasn't shown me anything this year.
Right.
And then, I hate to say it, by Tuskegee Golden Tigers, you were supposed to beat Tuskegee, the Division II team. Yes, the Booker T Classic, as I like to call it, but Hampton was supposed to win that game when it's all said and done.
Hampton kind of reminds me of Alabama A&M a little bit, and how you look at them, and the games they're supposed to win, they win, but or they struggle in the games they're supposed to win, and then lesser opponents in that category. But it's going to be interesting with Hampton and what they do. Having said that, you mentioned quality wins. App State It's a quality loss, I guess, if you will, for Norfolk State.
Correct.
Right. But you see the win in McNeese State. You see the New Hampshire win. Are the HBCUs getting some looks at in terms of the quality wins against their opponents at the same level? Another, but these opponents are PWIs, and they're going on the road and winning these games. Do Are we seeing a better representation for the HBCUs when they go play these PWIs that are at the same level at least?
What you are seeing is the trickle down effect, and I hate to use that word, but the trickle down effect of the transfer portal and NIL. What do I mean, LA? The transfer portal. You've got all these kids who are expecting to go to college, play immediately. Kids are signing with these P5 schools. Well, kids aren't signing with P5 schools anymore unless you're a
Right,
5 star or a 4 star. So
right,
some of that talent that would have gone to a University of Alabama, would have gone to a Georgia or a Clemson or a Notre Dame, and Nick Saban would have or Dabo Sweeney would have been able to stockpile them for 2 years, and then you like, dog, how did they reload? Because he's been there for 2 years training in the program, but he hasn't really been playing. Those kids are not sitting there and not playing anymore. What they're doing, they're going down to lower levels. That's why you see the quality of football or the FC or the group of five schools getting better, because these are kids who are transferring who originally thought they were going to a power five and now going to group of five schools. Those kids who used to go to group of five schools are now going to FCS. Those kids who were going to FCS are now going to Division two and NAIA. That's what I mean by the trickle down effect. Then you factor in the fact that you've got this NIL money. You don't have to go to these P5 schools to get the bag anymore.
right.
And you know what bag I'm talking about? That
That's
you know
right.
the $100 handshakes like you used to get back in the day. It's gone from the back alley to the boardroom now. Now these kids can sign an NIL deal whether they are at North Carolina Central or North Carolina, Alabama A&M or Alabama. So it's the trickle down effect and the cumulative effect of both of those factors coming together that has leveled the playing field and will continue to level the playing field.
Talking with AD Drew, of course, here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. You, of course, can follow us on YouTube at LA Batchelor at YouTube. We'll get into where you can find his great work as well. Let's talk about the major division. There are no real surprises because of the wins. Um, Alcorn State, I thought might be a little bit higher than I would have put them. But talk about the top 10. Obviously, the top four, even South Carolina State, you can put it in there in five in terms of, really deserving to be in the top five. But, Delaware State, Pine Bluff, they went to a massacre, if you will, and Prairie View, who, excuse me, came off a loss, is in there. Florida A&M rounding out the top 10.
Give me a second. I've got to pull up
Yeah.
my. And shout out to Brian Fulford. I tabulated the results. Brian Fulford is the one who actually wrote the articles. So shout out to HBCU Pro Sports member Brian Fulford for putting the words together.
Right.
Uh, looking. Oh, this is. I've got the wrong poll. Hold up, just a second, my brother. Just a second. All right, here we go. Looking at the top 10. 1, 2, and 3, like you said, pretty much set. Alabama State, benefit of having an off week this year, sitting at this off week this week, having a bye week this week, sits at the number 4. I agree with the Alcorn. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't like Delaware State sitting at 7. Delaware State, those last four are just kind of, you ain't have anybody left to put there. Delaware State still should not be sitting at 7 ahead of UAPB. Let's think about Delaware State's 2 wins. They beat VUL and they beat Lincoln of PA. And they got trounced by Delaware. Is that really a resume? It's 2-1 on paper, but are those 2 wins better than some of our 1-win teams? Same thing with Arkansas Pine Bluff. They played a very good Lane team, but Lane is 0-3 on the season.
Right.
So just kind of looking at those things. Prairie View laid an egg this week. Prairie View is there by default. FAMU, because they were off, did not have a chance to improve themselves or hurt themselves. That's why FAMU was in there, in my opinion.
When you look at the D2 level, I mean, Bowie State, little struggle. I don't think anybody saw the loss to Shaw coming. I don't care. I mean, it's as good as Shaw can be.
Some people in North Carolina did.
Yeah, well, yeah. But it's unlike Jackson State, Bowie's the big bully on the block. And yeah, well, I was gonna say they've been struggling. So, what's the difference with this team this year?
You got a new leader. And with the old lady, he took some of his players with him. And then let's think about it. They lost not one, but 2 cornerbacks to Southern off of last year's championship team. So got a lot of new faces in there. Bowie's going to be all right. It's just that they are not all right now. When you look at the mid-major division, you really have 2 tiers. Virginia Union, Albany State, Benedict, Fort Valley, Langston. Let's talk about tier 1. And some people are throwing Fayetteville State in there. Me personally, I'm throwing Fayetteville State in at the top of tier 2, just for context. I don't know how you struggled in your personal vote, but when I submitted my vote, I kind of struggled with how to rank that first tier. What do I mean? Virginia Union. You've got that big win over Valdosta State. No disrespect to Virginia Union, but you beat VUL 77-0. You were supposed to beat them like that. You beat Livingstone, I believe. I believe they played Livingstone last week. You're supposed to beat Livingstone. So VUL has one quality victory. We're going to give them that one quality victory. Is that why they're number one? Is it because of their quality victory along with the 2 handling of your businesses? I struggle with that. Albany State beat 2 good Gulf South teams, Mississippi College and Shorter. Gave FAMU a good run for their money defensively, could not get anything going offensively. Do I really penalize Albany State for losing to an FCS? They supposed to lose to that FCS. The fact they only lost 23, I believe it was 23-10. I've got to give them some props for that. I got to give them some bonus points for that. That loss definitely didn't hurt them. I like Albany State at number 2. You could even consider them at number 1, except for the fact you've got that Benedict College team right there. Benedict College leading the nation in fumble recoveries. They have recovered 8 fumbles in 3 games. Think about that when you think about the turnover battle. That Benedict defense right now is looking to be like the Albany State defense was last year. They've got the 2 quarterback system going on down there. I'll be interviewing Coach Chennis Berry a little bit later on today for Benedict as soon as I get off of this podcast, because I've got that game against Kentucky State this Saturday. I'll be doing play-by-play for that on HBCU League Pass Plus. Shameless plug right there. But I definitely like what Benedict does. Fort Valley, first two games look real good. Struggled last week against Allen, who is surprisingly good. I say surprisingly because no one expected Allen to be this good. I knew they were going to be competitive, but the rest of the masses did not expect Allen to be competitive. And then you got your cousins way out there in left field, and that being the Langston Lions. Everybody forgets about Langston out there in the
They always
NAIA
seem to.
and
They
don't
always
give
seem
them the
to.
respect.
Yeah, they always seem to forget about Langston. That seems to be the theme every year.
But Langston's putting up over 40 points a game early on in the season. So it was tough. Me personally, I had Langston ahead of Fort Valley on my ballot. So just for full disclosure, everybody. But there no offense to the people in our organization. There are a lot of people in our organization who do not give the respect to Coach Quentin Wilson, Quentin Morgan out there in Oklahoma. Now let's go to tier two. It's actually a toss-up, in my opinion, between Fayetteville State and Virginia State. Both teams laid the egg for the loss. So you can throw it in there. Another team that people forget about is West Virginia State. West Virginia State plays in a tough Mountain East Conference. Bowie, I left Bowie off of my ballot. Bluefield State, I had up there at number 9 on my ballot. Actually, I may have had Bluefield State 8. I don't have it in front of me, but Bluefield had a tremendous job over the last couple of weeks there, and that's going to be a big battle as you got a top 10 matchup with Fort Valley traveling to Bluefield this
No, When you
this
say
particular
when
week.
you say you had Bowie State off your list, what do you mean?
Bowie State did not. Bowie State was not on my ballot, my personal ballot that I submitted. You got Shaw in there. We're forgetting about the other NAIA school that we have. That being Florida Memorial with a big win over Warner out of the Sun Conference this past week in a non-conference conference game. They're not even receiving votes, my brother. Not to be talking about our brethren, but we've got, I wish our brethren would look at some of these teams. Florida Memorial should at least been in the receiving votes category.
And I think too, AD, that at that level, I think the schools you mentioned get left out, and we I think, in my opinion, are guilty in some ways of looking at these schools on reputation. Sometimes you mentioned Bowie State, Union being at the top now. I mean, I think that Langston and the schools out of West Virginia and different you know, divisions, I think that we overlook them and how consistent they've been. I mean, even Central State has had a good year, and so far, nobody's really talking about it. You look at the strength of schedule, I get it, but some of these schools really should be acknowledged in the top 10.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and this happens a lot with people who vote. A lot of times, people are so enamored on the team or the teams that they cover, they don't do the research and look at the other metrics. You mentioned strength of schedule. You should be looking at strength of schedule when you turn in your vote. And all three of those records aren't the same. I just mentioned the difference between a Virginia Union 3-0 and an Albany State 2-1. Albany State overall probably had, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I guarantee you Albany State would have a better overall strength of schedule than Virginia Union, although Virginia Union has the best quality win. Same thing, Albany State strength
And
of
that's what
schedule is going to be ahead of Benedict and Fort Valley's also. But
you're
Langston's
right.
strength of schedule on its level is going to be good. And speaking
And
of
that's
strength of
and that's the
schedule,
thing. I mean, I don't understand.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of strength of
No, go
schedule,
ahead. What you say? Speaking of strength of schedule.
Jackson State's strength of schedule is one of the worst among FCS HBCUs.
But I think the difference though with Jackson State is that on paper they have the talent to win,
to go along with a weak
regardless
strength of
to
schedule,
right,
which
right.
which gives
But
you
then I'm
66,
just saying,
66, 24 ball games, which gives you
oh, Grambling State, right?
59 3 ball games. And thank God for Grambling, because I'm a fan of you, Rattler. Thank God for Grambling letting them get 66 against them. So now they can take us off the board as the team that gave up the most points to Jackson State.
Oh man, I said, well, we talked about it last week about how Jackson State. I felt like they had that South Carolina State loss in their mouth, and they took it out on your Rattlers and stuff in that game. But it's a difference between talent and strength of schedule and reputation and strength and schedule. And even AD, I know you got to go. Even just looking at wins and losses and not strength of schedule.
Right. And that's another thing. Some people just look at the record on paper versus, like I say, taking a deeper dive in the numbers, strength of schedule, quality of win. Hey, Fort Valley won that game 29-27 against Allen. I wonder if that was factored in when somebody voted. If Fort Valley was trailing most of that ball game, had to come back in the fourth quarter to beat Allen. Or people looking at that stuff, or we pull it up to box scores, different things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm not, we're not, at least I'm not, but I'm sure you're not criticizing the way people make
No,
their votes, what we do it. But, there are some factors that need to come in play that at least me, I look at strength of schedule, I look at opponent, I look at who did what in the division and in that level, and then I make the judgment based on that. You can have I don't think it's anything wrong to have an 0-3 team that has a stronger strength of schedule and almost won games over a 2-1 team.
yeah.
I mean, that's how I look at it in terms of just kind of looking at the landscape. Um, 80, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you talk about teams with strength of schedule and the 0-3 record, VUL has one of the top strength of schedules, Virginia Lynchburg, in HBCU football.
Right, right. And they've been sort of
They've been
the
competitive this year.
right. They've been sort of the dormant of a lot of teams that have been beating up on them for a little while. But Langston is the one team I was going to bring up, and you already brought them up. So that's the team I think that doesn't get the credit at that level that they deserve. And I
Right.
don't think they have since I've been voting for them, voting and stuff. I don't think they get enough credit. The Lions have been really competitive, very good. So I don't think they really get the credit that they deserve. AD, before you go, let people know how they can reach out and follow you. And I know you got interviews coming up and how they can check that out.
Yeah. And before I give that information, I just want everybody to know I'm not criticizing the voters of the HBCU Pro Sports Media Association, but this
No,
is a
not at all.
podcast.
Right,
So we need to discuss things like this in order to create conversation to keep you
right.
people listening to come back. I love my fellow members of the Pro Sports Media Association. And just like everybody else, we all have differences of opinion. We're better
Right.
to express my different opinion than on LA's podcast if I can't do it on my own.
Oh, do it on mine.
Hey, I do it on yours. That way they shut you down. They don't shut me down. No, I'm just playing, brother. I'm just playing.
Oh,
Um,
man.
no, but seriously, start off with this Saturday on HBCU League Pass Plus and on the Black College Sports Network. That's my BCSN.net. You can watch myself along with Jamie Walker, fellow HBCU Pro Sports Media Association member, as we will be calling the Kentucky State at Benedict football game. That game kicks off at 6 p.m. Eastern time. That's HBCU League Pass Plus And anywhere that you can find the BCSN family of networks, including YouTube, Facebook, and the My BCSN and My JBN app, which is where you can also find my podcast at. That is the BCSN Sports Wrap every Sunday night, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern on those same platforms. Make sure you download the My BCSN app and put your information in there so that you can get the notifications every time that we come on the air. And if you prefer YouTube, Facebook, go ahead and hit that thumbs up or that like button so that you can get those and turn on your alerts so you can get that information not only with our podcast but all of our podcasts are on. And if you're an audio person, go to your favorite audio source, uh, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Google. Make sure you download the BCSN Pod Zone. That's where you find the audio version of all of our podcasts. If you want to get in touch with me, hit me up on Twitter. That's BCSN Drew on Twitter. That's BCSNDREW on Twitter. I think I got all the plugs in, my brother.
I think you did, but if folks that you can see, I mean, it's not just regular straight talk sports. He's got some flavor with it, so you need to check him out. He always does a phenomenal job. I always got to get a laugh in there, especially as he puts the criticism on the Batchelor News radio show.
Oh, no, trust me, I'm a lot worse on our own podcast, you know. Do I got a couple more minutes before you got to
Yeah,
kick me
sure. Yeah.
All right. There was a press release today from Jackson State University. You know, the water crisis and people passing out at the game at Jackson State was was probably a bigger story than the game itself.
The win, yeah.
So that was I got no, I want to pull it up because I don't want to misquote it. Jackson State put this out today. Jackson State University Department of Athletics has taken steps to improve the fan experience at Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium. Free bottled water will be given in the tailgate areas prior to the start of the game. The quantity of water available for sale will be doubled, and additional designated concession areas for beverage-only transactions have been added. Concession hawkers will continue to sell beverages in the stands. Emergency first aid support will assist anyone experiencing heat exhaustion during the game. Additionally, fans are asked to take the following precautions to avoid heat exhaustion. Drink plenty of water prior to sun exposure. Do not wait until you're thirsty to drink. Wear loose-fitting, lightweight clothing and wide brim hat. Wear sunscreen. Take precautions with certain medications. So this Sunday's game is at Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium. Is another 1 p.m. kick. And you up there in the north, my brother, but down here in the south, you know, this time of year, we don't normally start games till about 6 o'clock local time. So they've got another 1 o'clock kickoff where the sun will bake a hole in your head and fry an egg. And then you're talking
I don't know
about
why they didn't adjust it. Why wouldn't they change it?
Stadium, metal bleachers. Yeah, it's gonna be hot. I don't know. You're gonna have to bring on Bishop and Neely to ask those guys that. They could probably give you more of an answer of that with the pregame show. So, but it's 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 very concerning. That's why the Florida A&M band did not go out during the OBC after halftime. Members of the band were suffering from heat exhaustion, heat exposure. Same thing happened with the Jackson State band. And you know, I've never personally ever wore a band uniform, but I know those band uniforms are hotter than football uniforms.
Yeah, they carrying all that weight, man, with the uniforms and stuff.
And then you got a big
something that we have to
or
look at.
whatever on your shoulder also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit too much. That's a conversation for another day. Why are they still keeping the games early in that hot sun in Mississippi? And we actually got one of the reporters that's going to be on next week, actually Thursday, to talk about the water crisis. AD, man, good stuff. I'm glad you brought that to our attention. We need that. And thank you, man. You be blessed. Be careful. We'll talk with you next week, my brother.
All right. We if not next week, we get you in two.
Absolutely. Thanks,
All right.
man.
Appreciate you.
Always good to have AD Drew on the show, talking some HBCU sports with us. If you miss any part of our broadcast, please not only go in and watch and listen, but subscribe to our YouTube page. It's LA, last name Batchelor, Batchelor, Batchelor. We invite you to do that. We thank you for joining us today. Join us for another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show. I'm LA Batchelor on the Batchelor News Radio Network.